We work very hard to recognize that the human being is capable. The form of the curriculum arose out of an understanding of human development. In the spring, when the bulbs start blooming, you're going to have crocuses before daffodils unless you've done something odd to the daffodil to make it go first. So they're coming, and then the daffodils come, and then the lilacs are out, and then the tulips, and then the roses. In the human being, it's the same way. Certain capacities develop. The capacity to be upright is one of the main functions of the little baby, to learn how to be upright. Then speech comes. I mean, but you can point to a child who stood before he spoke, or vice versa. But in general, the pattern is pretty recognizable. And it certainly isn't just Waldorf teachers who've recognized it. We all have a sense of how the sequence unfolds. What's true of the curriculum, though, is that it goes deep into understanding what happens between 7 and 14, and then, if we're ever fortunate enough to have a high school, between 14 and 18. But we're looking at, what does the 7-year-old need? What does the 8-year-old need? What does the 9-year-old need? So we have these points of development that we recognize, and the curriculum addresses them. Probably the easiest way to typify it is to take you through the language arts history curriculum. For the first grader, it is based on the world of fairy tale. This is how they're going to learn to read and write. They're going to write first, they're going to hear a story, they're going to write some sentences from the story when they know their letters, and eventually they're going to be able to read what they've written. But the basis is the world of fairy tale, because that child is just moving out of early childhood. Most of our first graders are 7 or turning 7. That's an old-fashioned date. It's the traditional age of reason. And something new is happening in the child at that point that's recognizable as they move into a capacity to think differently, or to think in a way that is identified as thinking. Then in the second grade, where we have mostly 8-year-olds, we base the language arts curriculum on fables and stories of saints and heroic people. It kind of it addresses the polar opposites in human beings. The saints and heroes are our best selves, in a way. They're very human, but they're our best selves. And the fables based on animals are all those human capacities that we kind of wish we didn't have. To be jealous, to be lazy, to be scheming. So the teacher isn't lecturing to the child about this, just presenting these stories. They'll live into the child, and the child will learn something from them in addition to what they read and write. In the third grade, it's the first time that the curriculum comes just firmly down to the historical earth as we recognize it. It's based on the story of the language arts and history curriculum are based on the stories of the Hebrew peoples. We'd call it the Old Testament, but it's also a narrative, a great history of a people, a great story. And then in the fourth grade, it moves north to the Northern European myths, which are based on the Icelandic Eddas and what we would think of as the Ring Saga, the Nibelungen stories. In fifth grade, it's a survey of ancient cultures. It starts with ancient India and the Mahabharata, and then moves west through, I won't get the sequence exact, but through Mesopotamia and Babylon and Persia and Egypt, and then into Greece. When Greece is first introduced, it's the mythic Greece. It's the Greece of the gods. The children are just gradually coming down to the real historical facts as you and I know them. And they end with the story of the Greek city-states. It's the first formal history. So that's where fifth grade ends. In sixth grade, they couldn't be more firmly on the earth if they tried their Romans. We frequently have sixth graders marching through the auditorium in Roman formation. That's where my office is. We always have to close the door when they're doing Rome. Sixth grade probably goes into the very early Middle Ages, because that is the end of the Roman Empire. It just turns at that moment into a different human reality. And in seventh grade, they pick up with the Middle Ages. Seventh grade's devoted a lot to the Renaissance, to the Age of Exploration. And then in eighth grade, they go basically from the French Revolution to the present. And I can't imagine what that's like. That's longer than I meant to be, but one thing I do want to point out about this curriculum is that, even just this history curriculum, is that it's entirely experiential. I think of this curriculum as being based in wonder, in a sense. And the wonder is, what is it like? When we teach a foreign language, in a sense, we're bringing to the children a sense of what it is like to be a child in that country. When we teach science, we do it phenomenologically. If you and I were going to be studying the physics of light, as I think it's 6th graders here, we would first be put into an absolutely dark room where you couldn't see a thing. And then light would come. And we would be asked not to analyze it, not to do an experiment about it, but to really look. Because close observation goes along with wonder. You know, if we really look at ourselves, if we really look at the other people in the world, it is wondrous. How did you get to be who you are, and I who I am? I think that's a capacity we're giving these kids.
As a Waldorf teacher, I have a number of goals. One of the first goals that I hold in my heart is that each child recognize their own potential, that they have the courage to try things that are difficult for them, and that they also have the wider interests, that they are willing to reach out and help each other. So if someone's very skilled in an area, that they also learn how to help the person next to them who may not be so skilled. I want them very much to learn to work as a group, to have a community feeling that they will go out and help in general, in the community, in the world, in their own lives. I think the real thing with reading is that one of the things that Steiner had said was that very small children should not be forced to read. And in this school, we simply start with reading at a slower pace than your average school. Most of your average schools are in kindergarten starting reading, and we don't. We want the kindergarten child to play, to develop social relationships, to develop a rhythm and a way of relating to school. And we start reading in the 1st grade, and we still start it at a slow pace. I find by the time the children are in their 3rd or 4th grades, they're well caught up with most of their peers. And as far as I can tell, as they go on, they often surpass the average reading speed, comprehension. And when my children have been tested in standardized tests, which I have given them, they've done very well. Many of them reading at a college level when they were at the end of 6th grade. So I don't think there's any problem with that. It's just because we start more slowly. People get the idea that we don't emphasize it. We don't emphasize it at that point. We build it. So we build the foundation for it.
I track the statistics on alumni. I've got 3 alumni now. I mean, I keep in touch with how people are doing. They're doing wonderfully. They're wonderful kids, and they're doing wonderfully. Is every last one of them a straight A student? No, of course not. Are many of them? Yeah, many of them are. What I find in them is that they have an ability to see something in life that is right for them, to find it and go for it, which leads to a lot of different things. You know, when I put alumni news in the newsletter, I might tell you about somebody who's on a football team or ran a track meet, or I might tell you about somebody who got named an Eccles Scholar at UVA or won a science fair. I mean, there are a lot of different things kids do. But I have no trouble telling parents, prospective or current, that the kids are wonderful. They are in good shape when they leave. And will they be challenged? They better be. What was the point of keeping all this alive in them if they couldn't meet challenges?
Waldorf schools are critical in today's world. We are coming into a time that there are problems that we will be facing in the future that we cannot imagine today. And what Waldorf education does is it trains the mind and the heart and the will of the children in a very flexible way so that they can look at these new problems with absolutely new eyes and find new solutions. There are problems and there are solutions that you and I will never even have to imagine. Our children will. And Waldorf education prepares them to be able to look into their world, not our world now. It prepares them to look into their world in the future and meet it in a way that is filled with hope and filled with capacity to impact.